Hi, I'm Bob. We will continue our solutions to exercises in section 9.5 about the policies that create a wedge between supply and demand curves. It makes the market price different from the firm's marginal cost at the equilibrium quantity and leads to a deadweight loss to society. We will solve the next 6 problems in this section today. Let's see exercise 5.5. Suppose that the government gives rose producers a specific subsidy of 11 cents per stem. What is the effect of the subsidy on the equilibrium prices and quantity, consumer surplus, producer surplus, government expenditures, welfare, and deadweight loss? In the last video, we solved a problem about the subsidy effect on the equilibrium and welfare. We assume that the subsidy is given to the consumers, and we shift the demand curve to find the new equilibrium. In this exercise, the subsidy goes to the producer, and we shift the supply curve. We will see that the conclusion is identical, regardless of whether the subsidy goes to consumers or producers. The supply curve shifts downward by 11 cents because the subsidy reduces the firm's marginal cost by 11 cents per unit, and the firm's supply is its marginal cost above its minimum average variable cost. The market supply curve is the horizontal sum of the firm's supply curves. It falls by 11 cents for each level of quantity. We still follow the 3 steps to solve the problem. In the first step, we find the original equilibrium. The intersection between the demand curve and the original supply curve determines the market equilibrium of E1. The consumer surplus is the area above the price line and below the demand curve up to the equilibrium quantity. It is the area of A. The producer surplus is the area above the supply curve and below the price line up to the equilibrium quantity. It is the area of B plus C. After the subsidy, the new market equilibrium is E2, which is determined by the demand curve and the after-subsidy supply curve. The consumer surplus is the area of A plus B plus D plus E. The producer surplus is the area of C plus F plus G. The government subsidy cost equals the subsidy per unit times the equilibrium quantity. It is the rectangle area of A plus B plus D plus E plus H plus I. In the third step, we find the effect of the subsidy on consumer surplus, producer surplus, and social welfare. The consumer surplus increases by the area of B plus D plus E. We then use a trick to find the change in producer surplus. Notice that the triangle area of A plus B plus C plus H is the same as the triangle area of C plus F plus G because they have the same base and height. So, the change in producer surplus equals A plus B plus C plus H minus B plus C, which is the area of A plus H. The total rise in consumer surplus and producer surplus is A plus B plus D plus E plus H. The government expenditures on subsidy are the rectangle area of A plus B plus D plus E plus H plus I. Thus, the social welfare loss is the area of I, the triangle wedge between the price consumers pay and the firm's actual marginal cost. The deadweight loss is the triangle area of I. If we compare it with the result of exercise 5.4 in the last video, we will find that the conclusion on the changes in consumer surplus, producer surplus, and welfare is the same. It doesn't matter whether the subsidy is given to consumers or producers. Let's solve exercise 5.6. Suppose that the market demand function for cows is as follows, where Q is the number of cows per month and P is the price per cow. The market supply function is Q equals P. In part A, what are the equilibrium price and quantity of cows? What is the consumer surplus, the producer surplus, and welfare? We find the before subsidy equilibrium, E1. Combining the demand and supply functions gives the equilibrium price of 100 and the equilibrium quantity of 100. We draw the supply and demand curves to help solve the problem. We obtain the consumer surplus by integrating the difference between the price line and the demand curve up to the equilibrium quantity. It is 10,000. It's the area of A. The producer surplus is the triangle area of B. It is 5,000. The before subsidy welfare is the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus, which is 15,000. In part B, now suppose that the government provides a subsidy of $100 per cow. What are the new equilibrium price and quantity? The consumer surplus, the producer surplus, and welfare. We first find the after subsidy equilibrium, E2. We already know from previous exercises that the results are identical regardless of whether the subsidy is given to consumers or producers. Suppose the subsidy goes to consumers. It shifts the demand curve upward by the amount of the subsidy. Combining the new demand function and the supply function gives the after subsidy equilibrium price of 175 and equilibrium quantity of 175. Then we calculate the consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is the area above the price line and below the demand curve up to the equilibrium quantity. It is the area of A plus B. Notice that the area of A plus B equals the area of A plus C plus F plus G plus H. So, the consumer surplus can be found by integrating the difference between the original demand curve and the price line at 75 up to the quantity 175. It is 13,333. The change in the consumer surplus equals 13,333 minus the before subsidy consumer surplus 10,000, which is 3,333. It corresponds to the area of F plus G plus H. Next, we calculate the after subsidy producer surplus. It is the triangle area of C plus D plus F plus I. It is 15,313. The change in producer surplus is 10,313, which is the area of C plus D. The government subsidy cost equals the subsidy per unit 100 times the equilibrium quantity 175. It is minus 17,500. It is the rectangle area of C plus D plus F plus G plus H plus E. The change in welfare is the sum of the changes in consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the subsidy cost. It is negative 3,854. The deadweight loss to society of the subsidy is 308,054. It is the small triangle area of E, the wedge between the firm's marginal cost and the actual price consumers pay. Let's jump to exercise 5.7. What is the welfare effect of an ad valorem sales tax, new, assessed on each competitive firm in the market? The before-tax equilibrium is E1. The consumer surplus is the area of A plus B plus C plus D. The producer surplus is E plus F plus G. The after-tax equilibrium is E2. For each dollar the consumer spends, the government keeps a fraction new, which is the ad valorem tax rate. So the ad valorem tax rotates the supply curve upward from S1 to S2. The after-tax consumer surplus is A. The after-tax producer surplus is B plus E. The change in consumer surplus is minus B plus C plus D. The change in producer surplus is B minus F minus G. The total change in the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus is the area of C plus D plus F plus G. The government tax revenue is the area of C plus F. Therefore, the change in social welfare is minus D plus G. The triangle area of D plus G is the deadweight loss to society. It is the wedge between the price consumers pay and the firm's actual marginal cost. Let's do exercise 5.8. What is the long-run welfare effect of a profit tax? The government collects a specified percentage of a firm's profit, assessed on each competitive firm in the market. In the long run, competitive firms make zero economic profit. The government could not collect any profit tax. Suppose we are talking about the business profit that ignores opportunity cost and is usually larger than the economic profit. In that case, the profit tax has a similar effect to a specific tax. It shifts the supply curve upward and leads to a deadweight loss to society. Let's answer exercise 5.9. What is the welfare effect of a lump sum tax, L, assessed on each competitive firm in the market? In the short run, the lump sum tax is the firm's fixed cost. It will not affect the welfare analysis because the producer surplus equals the revenue minus the variable cost. It does not take the fixed cost into account. So the lump sum tax is irrelevant to the welfare analysis in the short run. In the long run, the lump sum tax raises the firm's average cost by L over Q, which is the per unit lump sum tax. The market supply curve is horizontal at the minimum long-run average cost. It shifts upward by the per unit lump sum tax from S1 to S2. Before the tax, the market equilibrium is E1, and the consumer surplus is the area A plus B plus C. The producer surplus is zero in the long run. After the tax, the market equilibrium is E2. Consumer surplus becomes A, and producer surplus is still zero. The reduction in the sum of the consumer surplus and producer surplus is the area of B plus C. The tax revenue is the area of B, which equals the per unit lump sum tax times the total quantity Q2. The welfare change is minus C, the wedge between the two supply curves. It equals the per unit lump sum tax times the reduction in quantity divided by 2. It is also known as the deadweight loss. Let's go to exercise 5.10. The United States not only subsidizes producers of cotton, but also pays $1.7 billion to U.S. agribusiness and manufacturers to buy American cotton. Assume for simplicity that specific subsidies are used. Use a diagram to show how applying both subsidies changes the equilibrium from the no subsidy case. Show who gains and who loses. The subsidy to producers shifts the supply curve to the right from S1 to S2. The subsidies to consumers shifts the demand curve to the right from D1 to D2. The equilibrium moves from E1 to E2. From previous exercises, we know that the subsidy creates a deadweight loss. It equals the triangle wedge area. In this problem, the shift in the supply curve creates a triangle ABC, which is the deadweight loss of the subsidy to the producers. The shift in the demand curve creates a triangle ADE, which is the deadweight loss of the subsidy to the consumers. The total welfare loss is the sum of the two triangle areas. Both consumers and producers gain, because both consumer surplus and producer surplus increase. The society loses because of the deadweight loss. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.